Hi, my name is Garnet Dupuis. I'm speaking to you from Thailand, along with my good buddy Ryan Williams, the creator and amazing power behind Insight Health Apps. I'm an integrated healthcare specialist. I've been working in these domains for a lot of years and have a great list of fortunate experiences. Right now, the thing that interests me most is sharing the learning experience. I love learning. And in this case, with Ryan, we're wanting to present remote healing in relation to the Insight Health Apps. Enjoy the webinar. Thanks. Today, we have, let's project about 90 minutes, not quite sure. We're going to do a pretty deep dive into an extraordinary topic. It's remote healing. Be there now, a little play on words. So Ryan's there in, I think, California. Is that where you are, buddy?
I actually am in California, and Garnet, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Super excited. Okay. I think, when you look at remote healing, people talk about long distance, or they talk about subspace, or they talk about metaspace, or they talk about Reiki, or whatever it is. And I think, as a sort of fundamental premise, there's an underlying theory that connects all of these different modalities, and I'm hoping that's what we're going to learn today.
Okay. Well, all right. I love this topic. I love learning in general, and I think learning is best when shared. So let's see what we can do. First of all, on screen, I'm delighted, to have been not only here and there a kind of a working member, but most of all, a longtime friend and associate of Ryan, and very proud of what he's done over a long time with the Insight Health Apps and the Genius Insight and so on. So I'm proud to be here representing him. Let's get into the topic. Boom. Okay, I'm going to ask all of us, Ryan, you, me too, to begin with an open attitude. This topic is either supremely relatable and obvious to some and completely weird and bullshit to others. So where is it that we can begin to look at the topic and then make sense of it, and even more than that, make use of it? So I'm asking here to recognize, and this is a bit simplistic, but it's still pretty accurate, to look at the very basic concept that we work with when it comes to existence. Our contemporary scientific reductionistic philosophy believes that existence is based in matter, and that matter is primary, and that anything else after that is a kind of a growth or an epiphenomena, and that even consciousness itself is a derivative of matter. And believe it or not, well, there are a number of, scientists or scientific philosophers that don't even believe consciousness is that important. They think of it as more like the foam on the beer, that it expresses itself, but it's not really the drink. Is matter primary? If you believe that matter is primary, then it's going to be a real hard sell to go deep into remote healing. It's still viable, but it's really unlikely. Now, I think there's a likelihood that most of us in this audience have a different point of view, whether we express it this way or not. The second view is that existence is based in consciousness, and that consciousness is primary, and that everything else is an expression and is a manifestation of consciousness, even including this stuff, matter, physical matter. So let's start right there, because, some of us maybe haven't considered it frankly or directly. Some of us have. Some of us might have kind of a foot in either side or just don't know. We will see that there is a premise here that remote healing has an attitude, has a perspective, has a belief that existence is based in consciousness, and that everything else is an expression or a manifestation of that. So how's that for a start, Ryan? Does that sit square with you, or what do you think?
That certainly sits square with me. I think, with the sort of users here, I think that's pretty exciting as well, because look, at the end of the day, we all know that long distance type of healing works, right? But in terms of how does it work, and, what is the basic premise that each and every one of us need to have in order to be able to make that work.
Yeah. Okay.
That to me is where the juice is.
Well, and it's juicy juice at that. Boom. Okay. Names tell the story. What do we mean by that? You know, the different kinds of derivative names. So sometimes we call it remote healing. That's the title of this webinar, this presentation, is remote healing, because it's kind of relatable. It's like, oh, I know what you mean. Or sometimes we say non-local healing, or sometimes distant healing. So you see that these names are all based on a spatial concept. Even with consciousness being primary, there is still this idea that in this kind of healing, space, distance, point A, point B, and there's this thing in between we call space. This is my opinion. I can't claim the truth, but I can tell you what I think is true. How's that? This is a mistake. This is where the trouble begins. Even if you believe wholeheartedly that consciousness is primary, if you approach this action, if you approach this process with the idea of distance, this is a false premise. This is a false premise. And if you hold that premise to be true, you're going to have a lot of unnecessary effort involved that actually doesn't make it work better. It actually gets in the way. Now you think, well, wait a minute, Garnet. Maybe that's too much too soon. Okay, but that's where I'm coming from, and you'll see where it's going. I propose, and it's up to anybody else in the world if they want to do this, I propose that we give it another name. I think we should give it a more accurate name, a name that doesn't start us off on the wrong foot of space, of distance. I like calling it conscious healing. That's what I call it. It's conscious healing because it's based on consciousness. It's not based on space. Why do we keep on thinking about this process and say, yeah, but I'm in Thailand and Ryan's in California. So if I'm going to do some remote healing over distance with Ryan, I've really got to shoot that frequency arrow like high in the sky, let it spin, and when the earth rotates back to Ryan, hit him in the head, or something maybe less stupid than that, but that kind of idea. So what I'm proposing, and you can accept or not, that we be careful about the names we give something, because the names have a lot of intrinsic or innate meaning, and that meaning may be false, it may be obstructive. Ryan, what do you think about calling it conscious healing? You good with that or not?
I actually find it really interesting because, some of the calls that we get when you look at the sort of long distance healing, people say, oh, well, you know what? I've got a friend of mine, he's in a different state. Your frequency is going to be able to bounce off the satellite to be able to hit, to be able to hit that specific person. And,
sure.
It's like no disrespect to that, but it's like really what I'm saying is that everyone has their own kind of sort of belief system, and no one knows how it works. They know it works, right? They know it works, but whether you can say it's long distance or not, it's not, because it's got nothing to do with distance. It can be someone that's next door or someone that's in a completely different state, and it certainly has nothing to do with the actual satellite.
So let's
conscious healing. I'm actually totally on board with.
Okay, sure. Conscious healing. There's he's dead now, but there's a remarkable researcher, psychological researcher, Piaget, like the watch Piaget. And I don't have the book anymore. When I moved to Thailand, I sold it, actually gave away, 2/3 of my library. And I still have a whole wall of physical books. And now it's all digital. But I had this one book by Piaget, and it's fascinating. There's a whole thick textbook on the description given by children of various ages for the reasons of natural phenomena, like when the clouds move or the sun rises or all these kinds of things. And it's just mesmerizing to read the explanations that children give. And the truth is that here we are in our adulthood, and although we live in science, like how does GPS work? I can drive around in Chiang Mai, Thailand with my cell phone and have this glorious angel talk to me, make a left turn, make a right turn. I think, wow. And, it's, what do they say? It's the paraphrasing that any science misunderstood seems like magic. And to me, I mean, I know it's scientific, but it really feels magical to me that she actually tells me when to turn left or right. It's amazing. Anyway, so boom, boom, context. Let's filter out obstructive beliefs. One of the main elements of being a satisfied or successful conscious healer, AKA remote, AKA whatever, conscious healer, is that we have to be sensitive, honestly sensitive, introspective to the different beliefs and assumptions that we have. Because some people just seem to be so great at it, and some people not so great, some people struggle. Some people say it's bullshit, I don't even want to get close to it. So a good part of this is that we all have these things called axioms. I'm totally fascinated by axioms. An axiom, it's a scientific term, it's in methodology, but an axiom is, and this is the actual definition, is that it's a self-evident truth, a fact that requires no proof. Wow. You know, I can have a belief, I can have a certainty of reality, and it is so obvious, believe me, I don't have to prove it to anyone, especially myself. So that's amazing. That's amazing. And psychologically, we all have a set of axioms. And life once in a while will come along and actually poke a hole in that axiom, and it's like, whoa, no, it can't be possible, or is it possible, or shit, it's possible. So working with conscious healing, we have to be sensitive as the healers, we say, to the fact that we come with baggage, that we have to be honest, we have to be open, to be aware that we have axioms. I mean, that, you know, like unquestionable facts may be false because you don't know, because you've never questioned them. So this domain invites us into introspection, into honesty. And, you know, here to me are a few, I mean, and there can be many examples of axioms that can be obstructive when we get involved with conscious healing. First one is, and it's kind of what we're already talking about, that the conscious healer, let's say me, if I'm the conscious healer, and I'm trying to in some way effectively benefit Brian over there in California, I believe if I have this axiomatic belief that we're actually separate and that, Ryan, you're a great distance from me, that's a problem to begin with. This is introducing, you know, friction or traction or obstruction that need not be there, but we insert it into the process because I think, oh, you know, how can I connect with Ryan and Jesus if I can? Maybe I can't, he's far away. And then if I do connect, I don't know, can I shoot the, you know, the arrow that far? You know, I'm sending you my prayers, you know. Can you see, Ryan, can you see how this is like a bunch of, it's like gravel in your shoes to begin with?
I completely do. I think, you know, part of the challenge is, again, you know, as a sort of conscious healer, is to try to, first of all, you know, differentiate in terms of the distance, it really has no issue. I guess, you know, my question, Garnet, is that when you incorporate different technologies into helping you sort of accentuate that kind of extension of who you are or who you should be or how you can project your frequencies, how does that sort of factor into the whole process?
Monstrously, and believe me, that's fat in the middle of this webinar. So we'll get to that.
Excellent.
We'll definitely get to a bit. You know, okay, that's all great stuff, and it's the kind of practical questions. But in my opinion, without stripping it down, first of all, before you start to put the clothing on, look at yourself in the mirror naked. That's where I'm trying to begin this process, so that other things that we get into in this learning experience, the shared experience, is going to have a kind of perspective that maybe it didn't quite have in the beginning. Okay. Second thing, it's on screen. this is not the issue of the distance thing, but it's kind of like a psychological infection where the healer actually doubts that this shit is real. The healer, pardon me for swearing, the healer actually doubts conscious healing. It's like that niggling, I don't know, man, but you want it to be true. You want it to be true, but is it really happening or not? That kind of, it's understandable to deny that we don't have some kind of reflective assessment, like, I don't know, depending how we were raised or the pushback that we get. So if the healer doubts the validity of the process, that's a kind of an infection. And they're going to, vacillate according to kind of the mood or the temperament, or whether somebody criticized them, or whether they said, I don't know, if like, am I a bullshit artist here, or is this real? So can you see how it's very understandable? I won't say normal, but it's very understandable that we have degrees of doubt that can be infectiously invading the process, sometimes maybe kind of even subconsciously. Have you tasted that one ever?
Absolutely. The sort of more clear you are with your intent,
yeah,
the sort of better your results are. It's like, whatever it is you decide to do in life. I mean, if you are really clear and you are crisp with your intent, the sort of feedback that you get from the universe and everything else that's surrounding you is very clear and it's sort of very crystal. Whereas if you're not clear, things come back really sort of jumbled.
Yeah. The water is muddy and it may take a long time to settle, right? So, okay, let's go to the third one. These are just examples. There's probably a few dozen of these things. But okay, what are we looking at? We're looking at here that every person, every one of us, has the likelihood of some kind of hidden, conscious or unconscious, obstructive belief or attitude. And if we pretend that we don't have any of these, then we can kind of limp along in the conscious healing process, but not really hit it bullseye. The third one I have here is, okay, they know that the distance is not an issue. That's cool. However they got there. The other is that they don't doubt the process, but they doubt themselves. They don't know if they really can do it. They don't know if they have the ability to engage in such a pure process. So this is more like a self-doubt, not a doubt in the process, but a doubt in their ability to engage in the process truthfully. So I'm not proposing that these are it, but these are examples of it's that those of us involved in this lifelong process of learning how to be beneficial like this, these things are to be encountered. And I won't go, this is like a side street here. These things also, and I use the word infect purposely because to me, it's like the image is appropriate, that these same things can infect the person that is wanting the healing experience, not the healer, but the healee also. So that in the relationship, even if these things are like totally cool with you, they may not be cool with the person on the receiving side. And if, intuitively or not, if they sense some of these doubts in you, then they get nervous. They can sit like, come on, man, like you weren't real clear right there. Like, what's going on? They might think, they may not say, but they might think. So this issue of obstructive beliefs is actually dynamic in the process. Actually, sometimes the person, requesting the healing is more clear and of a believer than you are as the healer. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. All of a sudden, the student becomes the teacher. The patient becomes the doctor in that sense. So, okay. So, this is us warming up. How does it feel so far, Ryan?
Good. Happy.
All right. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, to me, this is a big time turning point. It's a big time turning point. What I'm saying here is that all healing is conscious healing. So remember, we've pulled away the word remote and, non-local, distant, and inserted conscious healing. The proposition I'm making is that actually this way is at the heart of all healing. Even, and I have an example here, whatever, that even a surgeon involved in, cutting and that kind of thing, they can be engaged in the powers and principles of conscious healing. And I would risk the statement that oftentimes the success of the physical surgery could be very dramatically linked to the quality of their conscious healing. Like take a massage therapist, okay? Maybe closer to some of our experiences than being a surgeon. If you're because I've spent a lot of my life doing body work and massage therapy, I taught thousands of people, and it's very real for me. And the difference of having a person, when they're touching my body, being engaged in conscious healing, I think I can feel it. Call it connection, call it, I don't know, like there are lots of ways of describing it. But when somebody is touching you but not feeling you, right? They're touching you, but they're not feeling you. You feel them touching you, but they don't feel you being touched. They don't have the feeling. And I'm trying to make it simplistic. So the point here is that all healing involves conscious healing because all healing involves consciousness. So for me, in my simple life, this was a big kind of an aha moment. When, first of all, when remote broke down, it's not about space, it's about consciousness. And then, well, wait a minute. If there's no space involved, that means even when I'm intimately doing this with somebody, somehow, putting a harness and doing, energetic biofeedback, that the principles of what makes conscious healing work also make this work better. I thought, oh, okay, my life just changed. This is different. This is different now. So the pitch I'm making is that all healing involves conscious healing because all healing involves consciousness. I like that. I like that a lot. It also helped, in the simple term, it made me more attentive to what I would call being present when I'm physically involved with the person in a healing process. Because being present is kind of another way, it's kind of an analogy of conscious healing, being present, right? So that was a turning point for me. I hope for everybody else, it might be something to at least reflect upon. Okay, next. Ryan, you already mentioned it. It's a big time word these days. Intention, my intention. And I have a perspective on this from 2 points of view. One is because I've practiced seriously under different spiritual teachers, first Hindu tradition, then a Korean Taoist, the majority of my life under a Tibetan Buddhist, and this now more popular, but it was less popular many decades ago, this Dzogchen tradition. And in Vajrayana Buddhism, general, what we'll call Tibetan Buddhism, they have a principle that whenever you do a practice, not only is it important to recognize the intention, the what, but they put something even more important than the what, the motivation, the why. The why actually modifies the what. I'll give an example. It might be stupid. I usually give the same example. Let's say there are these two people amongst a class and they're studying digital online banking. What's their intention? Their intention is they want to learn all about digital online banking. Person X, person Y. Okay, side by side. But why? Why are they wanting to learn digital online banking? Person X wants to help establish small business loans for Indigenous women. Very noble, altruistic. Person Y wants to learn how to rip off digital bank accounts from commercial websites, right? The what is they both want to learn that. They want to learn digital online banking, but the why is different. So that's one perspective. That's the motivation. That's what I put here on screen. I was very fortunate in my life to have influence from the PAIR project, Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, which closed down in 2007. An amazing thing. Many of you know all about it. Brenda Dunn is still alive. Richard Jan, the engineering head, has now passed away. But Richard Jan was a very high-level engineering department head at Princeton, and he knew a friend that ran McDonnell Douglas Aircraft way back when, and in the early mid-70s. And they had at aircraft, right? They had gremlin problems. Gremlin, I mean, that's the kind of the mythic way, right? That they had weird engineering, anomalous things happening with their aircraft. It's like, this is weird. There's weird stuff going on here that shouldn't happen. And so the head of McDonnell Douglas, friends with Richard John, say, listen, you're a very high level, actually rocket scientist, engineer at Princeton. Can you help us solve this? We will fund a brand new project for you if you do that. And they did it. And Robert John, J-A-H-N, John, was totally pushed out by all those colleagues. It was weird shit. You know, is this like psychic research? But they investigated the effects of human intention on engineering processes, electrical and mechanical. And so anyway, why am I saying this other than the fact that it's fascinating? Well, one is it deals with just mental effects, right? Where these people could affect the stochastic distribution of random event generation processes. They could also affect even ball bearings. There's so many things. It's like, are you kidding me? No, I'm not kidding you. And it was pure science. It was awesome. What they found was that intention alone was not enough for successful effects or modifications of the processes. What they found was that if the person had a kind of, these are my words, paraphrasing, a heartfelt connection, a heartfelt disposition, a kind of a relationship feeling with the process, that their intention then was more effective than those that had a kind of a neutral, or certainly those that had a dispassionate or negative heartfelt intention. So the connection, the relationship, what I call heartfelt intention, is more effective than pure abstract intention. That is a big, big, big deal to me. I'll give a third perspective on this issue. One is that, again, this comes out of the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, this particular teacher. I thought this is awesome. He was talking about prayer. And in some cases, this topic fits into prayer, right? I believe, quite obviously, depending on how you define prayer. This teacher is making the point that the prayer is not the words. I'm making it more simple, right? The prayer is not the words, but the feeling you have when you make those words. He says the feeling you have is actually the power of the prayer. And the words of the prayer help you get to that feeling. You know, these things they're the difference of understanding and not understanding, for me. They're the difference of knowing how to do this and how to kind of stumble along and try to do it. So what the subset here on the same slide is that, going back to the simple term intention and motivation, the motivation, if it's unrecognized, if it's not really sensitively, if you don't own it, that distorted motivation can actually overpower your intention. That the intention degrades in its dynamic when the motivation is corrupting it. I'm an easy talker. What do you think about that, buddy?
It's sort of interesting, you know, because you talk about the sort of PAIR project, and
yeah.
part of our experience in terms of the technology that we have is the more people use our technology, the more sort of attuned they become.
Yeah.
And I'm not too sure I exactly understand what the attunement means, but the more you use it, the more the results are speaking to you, the more you get in tune with it, and the more it sort of almost begins to sort of sing for you.
Yes.
And that is exciting. I love that part.
Yeah, well, I would risk to say that attunement, that's a good word, that attunement to the process, to the experience, let's call it the experience, that attunement can and will be accelerated if people pay attention to the elements that we've been discussing so far. That if you want, because it's very attractive, become more attuned, it's like, ooh, if you want to accelerate that, pay attention to what we've been talking about. And there's a lot more to come. Okay, so here, let's look at this one. You can see at the top of the slide, connecting the healer to the subject, number one. Okay, this is about how to quote unquote connect, right? This is where the underlying beliefs are like front and center. If right now, Ryan, if we want to talk about how to connect the healer to the subject, what's the underlying axiom there? The underlying axiom is that you're not connected, you're disconnected. Right? I mean, that if you say, I want to try to connect with you, it means that you have a position where you start by being unconnected. Now you want to connect. Well, how about if you're always connected? How about if it's like, wait a minute, I'm not going to think that I have to connect with you. Hey, man, I just want to connect with you. It's like, no, wait a minute. I am not disconnected from you. Unity is fundamental. That in consciousness, it's impossible to be disconnected. We can be unaware, we'll get to that, but right now, that's why I have down here at the bottom, it's really critical to understand that we're already connected. Okay, I'm going to give a short telling of a big lesson in my life, short telling, I'll try. Years ago, I was watching television, remember that? And I'm from Canada. There is this very famous magician called Doug Henning, and he was doing magic act and just like impossibly mind-blowing, amazing stuff. Now, to show you how long ago it was, the host was Bill Cosby, back when he was a nice guy, right? So, okay, at the end of the show, and this is a live audience, a big stage, televised, he goes up to Bill Cosby, and everybody is just like bewildered by what this guy's been doing. He says, I would like to show you how I do every one of these tricks. Would you like me to show you? And Bill says, well, yeah. So they sat down right at the very edge of the stage, feet hanging down, like about a yard or a meter away from the first row of live people. He's like, okay, here we go. And he reaches down and gets a brown paper shopping bag and gives it to Bill Cosby. Like they're sitting about a meter or a yard apart, right? And he says, okay, check this out. And he upside, inside, it's just a stupid brown paper bag from the grocery store. So, okay, hold it. Don't let me touch it. Okay. Then he takes out a pile of newspapers, regular newspapers, and he says, okay, I'm going to rip these up in pieces and put them in the bag. Is that okay with you? Yeah. So he's ripping them up and putting them in the bag, until the bag is like, that's a lot of newspapers. Then he says, okay, Bill, don't let me touch it. Now you close it. He closes it. He says, say a magic word. He says, I don't know any magic words. He says, well, make one. He says, okay, abracadabra, shake it. Boom, boom, boom. He said, okay, now I'm not touching it, Bill. Reach in there, pull out the newspapers. Bill opens, not Doug, opens it up, takes out, the papers are completely whole. They're not ripped anymore. And it was impossible. It was like, And then this is the point of the story. Then Doug says to Bill again, do you want me to show you how I do all of this? It's like, well, yeah, how? He said, okay, I gave you the bag. You have the bag. True. I have all the newspapers. I tell you I'm going to rip them. And I make motions like I'm ripping them. I'm making sounds like I'm ripping them. You accept the fact that they're being ripped. And I put them in the bag. You can see where we're going. The papers were actually never ripped apart. The magic was not how to put them back together again. That's not the magic. The magic was to get you to believe that they were ripped apart. And that's the point here, that if we believe that we are ripped apart, if we believe that we are not connected, if we believe that we are separate and disconnected, then all the effort and the magic goes into trying to connect us again. How about if we're never disconnected? How about if we start there? That's my proposition, that we're connected, that there's no effort in connecting us. So what is it? Well, I think that the task is quite simply to fortify and focus the existing connection. We're connected. Ryan, you and I right now, absolutely connected in consciousness without any relationship to what we call space or distance. Okay, now, if that's true, and it is, what can we do to fortify and focus this connection? What can we do? So to me, we've spent roughly about half an hour, 30 minutes, drilling down into some of these issues that underlie the process of conscious healing that degrade or obstruct it. If we can move these things out of the way, what you called, beautifully, the attunement process with your Insight Health apps, that attunement is much more rapid and so much more relatable than believing that you have to climb all these mountains to get to a place that you're already at. So here's the first way. The first way to fortify and focus our existing connection. You just call the person to your mind. You just think about them. How many times in your life so far, me too, have you had this thing happen where you think about a person like, oh, Ryan, and then ring, 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 10 seconds later, you call me. Huh? Tell me that hasn't happened like innumerable times. All the time, right? Ryan, are you with me, buddy?
You know what? No, this is one thing which I'm actually sort of laughing about, if you don't mind me sort of interjecting, is that.
No, I want you to,
okay,
let's do this together,
it's
man.
Like, my experience is that I have met some people in my life that I've never met them before. And within, literally, you meet them and within 2 or 3 minutes, you realize that you are not resonating with them for whatever reason.
That's right.
And you know what? Don't tell me it's just from the 2 or 3 minute introduction. There's a past sort of connectedness, right? There's a connectedness that brings something forward, and that's the first part. And then there's other people that you'll meet that you just suddenly sort of gel with. And then thirdly, I'm thinking about someone and they call, or I call, or you meet them, and it's like it happens
all the time.
There's a statistical probability of that happening, but when you have a statistical probability that is far exceeding that, that's when you've got to sort of take a step back and realize, there's so much more going on.
Yes. Well, nail on the head. That's it. So if you want to fortify and focus the pre-existing connection, first thing is just simply, if they don't come to your mind, quote unquote, bring them to your mind, and that immediately fortifies and focuses the pre-existing connection. That's the first thing. Now, this process has an assumption. The process is that there's an adequate degree of clarity and purity in the mind of the healer. A certain amount of clarity and purity. I'm not saying absolute, like black, white, yes, no. It's a dimmer switch, right? And maybe it depends on mood or state of health or something. But this issue is why healers will tend to refine themselves over time. And as they refine their clarity and their purity, it's much easier to fortify and focus the connection. So, however you do, we'll get to that. But this idea, now, right now on screen is a slide that expresses a lot of conventional ways that it makes it easier to fortify and focus. the pre-existing connection between healer and subject. We know, we use, I mean, in your technologies, you've integrated many of these things. The name of the person, just their name is a fortifying and focusing way of sensing that pre-existing connection. Photos, you have a verbal interaction. Then you've got the so-called classic witness techniques where you have some of their hair or their saliva or blood or clothing or jewelry or something. These are ways not of making connection. Let's be clear here. They're not ways of making connection. They're ways of fortifying and focusing a pre-existing connection. So, depending on your own psychology, depending on your energetics, depending on your belief system, these things are extremely helpful. They're good to use. The idea of name, date, photo are, rather common now. So you see, if you do these things against the background that you have no connection and that they're far away, you're climbing a mountain barefoot. But if you already know they're not far, you're already connected, and you want to simply fortify and focus the connection, then it's like, oh, okay, I understand how to do this. I understand the process now. Okay, cool. One other way that's been used quite a lot, it's a little tricky, but it's the surrogate technique where the person that you're working with is physically not there. Consciously they are, but physically they're not. So you have a surrogate and you work physically on them. Like if it's a daughter, you work on the mother, or if it's a husband, you work on the wife, or something like that. Hey, if it's an animal, you work on the owner. So that's called the surrogate technique. And it's fine. The issue is there, of course, that there's another identity involved, and that can either be sticky or not sticky. I want to go along that tangent too far because it's not really used that much, but it's also possible, the surrogate technique. So connecting the healer to the subject, things, photos, names, blood, surrogates. Now, this one. This is, to me, fascinating. The power of ritual and ceremony. Basically, these slides are to me, they're just talk points, right? Each slide could be like 20 slides. The basic thing about ritual and ceremony, and I'm breaking it down, is that it helps make the invisible visible. It helps make the invisible visible. So in conscious healing, we can use rituals and ceremonies to help fortify and focus the pre-existing connection. That's cool. Because it's not like, we're totally, absolutely together. Sometimes we're not so together and we need some kind of help, some kind of structure to do that. Now, we all live ritualistically and ceremonially. We all live like that. If you've got kids, I know you've had, your kids are growing, but you have young kids. And let's say they're like a 5-year-old and you have a 5-year-old friend visit and you guys want sandwiches? Yeah. Is peanut butter and jam okay? Yeah. And you make the sandwich peanut butter and jam and you cut it corner to corner, but the other kid's family always cuts it side to side. And you put the sandwich in front of the neighbor's kid, cut corner to corner, and they look down on it and they go, uh-oh, right? This is freaking me out, right? This is not how you make a sandwich. You have to cut the sandwich side to side, not corner to corner. We have this in us. I mean, when you get up in the morning, I don't know, like when you put on your socks, I'll bet you there's a certain way you put on your socks that is kind of ritualistic, that there's a certain way that you do it, right? Now, that may or may not be true. It's a dumb example, but the point is that we structure psychologically, maybe energetically, but at least psychologically, we structure our lives ritualistically, ceremonially. And that helps because it helps to bring the invisible into the visible. So what I would encourage anybody listening that's involved in conscious healing to recognize how they ritualize the process. I bet, what light they turn on or what, it's like, wait a minute. So you can build on this. You can, according to your own belief system, Hey, for some people, you can light a candle. Okay, now I'm going to do conscious healing. And I'm using, all the technology, the insight, apps and the whole thing. But whenever I'm going to do conscious healing, boom, I light a candle, or I burn some incense, or I say a certain prayer, or I don't know, I face north and wiggle my bum. I don't know what it is. But the point is that is okay. Psychologically, it is innate to our way of structuring life. It's a way of bringing the invisible into the visible. And that's a really good thing. Do you
Maybe
have any rituals? What's going on?
I actually want to just throw a sort of curveball in there and
Yeah.
take it away from the sort of take it away from that and actually look at your typical sport, at your typical sport, right? If you take
most superstitious people in the world,
but that's my point. Like if you take soccer, or if you take rugby, if you take cricket, or any of the sports, like before somebody is going to take that shot, whatever that shot is, there's
what
a
they
ritual.
do. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
you know what? I mean, you take away that ritual, and that person's ability to convert will probably drop by 50%. Doesn't mean it's sort of right or wrong, but it just means that they have a process that is helping them to connect to something bigger than themselves.
That's right. I mean, perfect. Because I believe I do in a way. I work from the point of principle. I like seeing what makes things similar before I look at what makes them different. What makes things more the same as opposed to what makes things more different. And this is principles, right? The principle. And right now, I mean, what you said is, one, exactly true in my experience. Number two is exactly what we're talking about in relation to conscious healing. It's the same thing. So first of all, own up to the fact that you're probably more ritualistic than you recognize in common stuff, right? And then how does this help or not help the conscious healing process? When you sit down at your desk or your table or whatever it is, and you're going to quote unquote work with somebody, how can you fortify and focus the pre-existing connection using some kind of ritual or ceremony? And what you're going to find is, one, it's not dumbass. It's actually okay. Number two, there's some wisdom in it, because it works at creating a more accessible psychological state so that the psychology is flowing with the conscious healing. To me, we're doing what we already do, but maybe doing it a bit more, quote unquote, consciously. So that. Next one, this is a tricky one. The role of imagery. Imagery. There is a monstrous difference between imagining and imaginary. Now, it's a little bit of semantics, playing with words, but imaginary means it doesn't really exist. And to imagine means that you bring it into existence mentally. I'll repeat that. Imaginary means it actually doesn't exist. You're deluded, it's foolish, it's not there. It's an imaginary friend. But to imagine a friend is to mentally bring something out of the mental dimensions into a forefront of more increased existence. You create mentally. And we do this all the time. We use our imagination. So our imagination can, one way, be used to mentally create, or imagination could be just reflecting on deluded bullshit. So in this case, we can use imagery in conscious healing. We can actually create scenarios and images, because when you do that, you can charge them with certain emotions and meanings. For example, here we are, Thailand, California. I can imagine, because I'm doing a conscious healing process with you right now. And I just did. It happened. Now, what I did with that intention, heartfelt, was I imagined like a shower or a cloud of light descend over and through you. That fast. That's using imagery. And the imagery, why do we do it? It's to fortify and focus the pre-existing connection. So if you find ritualistically that also having some image involved, that image helps you charge with emotion and meaning the gift that you've just given. So that's okay. And I bet for any one of us, if we were honest and attentive, we would notice that we are imaging a lot. And that imaging can be used positively. Again, in Vajrayana Buddhism, they use this. There are two big steps, right? I don't know what attitudes people have about Buddhism, but whatever that is. The point is, it's a kind of a psychological method. And that they have a completion stage, generation stage and completion stage in their typical processes. And the first one, the generation, is that they're given a certain deity. Usually they show it on the tanka, like the fancy stuff they hang on the wall. There's some kind of like, deity or something. And the idea is that progressively over time, they image themselves as being the deity. They begin to reconstruct their self-image around the positive characteristics and attributes of that deity. So they say, well, that's weird shit. No, we do it all the time. We imagine ourselves all the time. We make up a personal mythology all the time. We make our lives into a story, and we quote unquote see ourselves in a certain way. Well, those practitioners, as yogis, said, well, this is really kind of automatic. Let's use that to our advantage. So they said, okay, since we do this stupid stuff all the time, let's not make it stupid. Let's make it positive and constructive. So let's slowly conform ourselves in this positive way. So using that dynamic, we can infuse our conscious healing processes using imagined, like I just showered this beautiful white diamond light over and through you. We can do that. We can do that. Seems kind of magical, but it's basically psychological. Okay. Yeah, this is, I've already mentioned this. This slide is just kind of a continuation of the idea of using what I've just described, the rituals or ceremonies, and using what I'll call directed thought or formative thought or imagery or something like that, that when you do these things, what is the power? Is the power that I imagine a bunch of diamond light showering you? Only indirectly. What's actually the effect? Was the feeling that I had, the feeling that we shared, the feeling that because we're connected, the feeling that was generated that we shared. So, if you shower golden light and you feel like a dumbass when you do it, I wouldn't recommend showering golden diamond light on people. But, if that conjures a feeling, a state of consciousness, there's your power. That's your power. Okay. How are we doing so far? We're poking at almost an hour. What's happened so far in your head that's kind of sticks out?
I think from my side is that we've always tried to sort of externalize this concept of, long distance healing and, radionics and Reiki and everything else. And we always try to take it outside of ourselves and try to put a kind of scientific badge on it and say, well, if I can try and understand it from a kind of scientific side, maybe it'll make more sense. But to me, that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that we're making. This is not a kind of scientific process. This is a sort of internal consciousness process that the more you sort of listen to yourself and the more you take your own guidance, the better results you're going to have, which is, again, what I've always said is that if you look at these, like, long distance healers, is that you've really got to be clear and very specific about, what it is that you want to do or sort of don't want to do. You have a big fight with your wife, as an example, the day before you go into practice. Yeah. That is going to impact the manner in which you work with your clients. And I think in the same way that, our sort of ritualistic processes here, like they shouldn't be dismissed. It's like, this is you sort of gearing yourself up. You sort of getting ready for that big kick.
I'm right with you. And I'll add to it. The common day science is not caught up with science. That it's been 100 years. The quantum revolution, and I don't want to use that word like it's used all the time, but quantum physics, quantum mechanics actually supports everything that we're saying here. Actually, it supports. The most famous example, and there are many, some of them quite complex, is the entangled particle, where if two particles interact, then regardless of distance after, if one is modified, the other modifies and expresses instantly. It doesn't matter the distance. There's no distance involved. And also, if you look at the writings, which I have quite a lot, other people too, of the pioneers, they end up speaking as we speak. One of the most disturbing positions that they have goes against the scientific method. Because the position is from quantum physics, I'm careful here, is that consciousness of the experimenter affects every experiment. And the scientific method believes in the isolation of the experience of the experiment from the double-blind studies, like, oh, nobody knows what's going on. This is an attempt to take out what is an untakeable outable, that's not a word, fact is that you can't take consciousness out of the process because it's consciousness that is allowing you to engage in the process. If you're not conscious, you're not engaged. So actually, quantum science is supporting what we're saying. It's just that reductionistic science, Cartesian science, hasn't yet caught up to this truth. So let's take it into the next one, because you mentioned this earlier, where I said, don't worry, we'll get to it. It's the thing about working with devices, technology. Okay, the first thing is, let's be careful to not, again, separate, like Bill Cosby with his Doug Henning papers. Let's not separate what's not already together. Is that the right way of saying it? Things are already unified. Let's not rip them apart and then try to put them back together again. Technique and technology. Don't separate them. There are techniques and then there are technologies. They are seamless. Right now, I'm employing a technology called my body and my voice box, and I'm vibrating waves in the air against this microphone, and magically you're hearing it, right? So technique and technology, this is really important. Go back to the pair thing, that the people that had the best reliable intentional interactions with the stochastic processes were those that had a heartfelt connection. That's why do people name their car, name their boat? This is Jung, right? When he got to the point where he started to have experiences and relationships with his pots and pans. I'm like, okay. So if you don't separate your device, if you don't separate the technology from the technique, you're already way ahead of the game. So what do we mean by this? Okay. Of course, like everybody else, I encountered this problem many times in my life. And at what point, for those of you who've been around long enough, Ryan, you know about the attempts to create digital prayer wheels and the whole process, right? So I was with my Tibetan teacher. He was like full-on Repang yogi lineage holder from Eastern Tibet, real deal.
The real McCoy.
And yeah, a real McCoy. And so, because I've spent time in the Himalayas quite a lot. And so you see these prayer wheels all over the place. Ones that like the hand one, you go whoop, 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 like this, or the big ones, you kind of give it a whack. Or even I was quite deep in Eastern Bhutan, like you think nobody's ever been there before, was the feeling. And then you would encounter this prayer wheel in a stream and the water was turning it. So there's a lot to go on here. So I said to my teacher, he's passed away now. I said, listen, are prayer wheels real or not? Right? I mean, I just tried to break it down. And so what was my thing? I said, well, what I was asking is, do they really have an actual effect? Or is it just kind of a placebo effect? It's like, if you believe it, it works, but actually it doesn't really work. It's only if you believe that it works, that kind of thinking. And this teaching, of course, you have to have that mental connection because the words are not enough. So I think he and I had a good connection, quote unquote. And he said without a pause, he said, they are equally real and unreal. And I tell you, that pinged me. It's like, oh shit, I got it. What did I get? I get that I had bumped into one of my unexplored axioms, that I had this axiomatic position that there was this artificial separation, that the matter, the material of the wheel and those that made it and the effects on me, that had these things like Doug Henning's newspapers all ripped apart. And what kind of magical process could obviously put these back together again? And then what broke through to me is that you don't give these things power. You don't give your device power. You don't give the prayer wheel power. By its nature, it has its own power, and that power is inseparable from your power. Like, this might be like a giant hurdle to jump, but that right now I'm looking at this computer of mine, and I can have this idea that it's a machine, somebody made it, and even though I've used it for a long while, and what you call that attunement process. That attunement process is when you begin to break down that conceptual separation. That, I just lent this young guy a book that was very meaningful for me a long time ago. Maybe you know about it. It's a classic. It's called Zen and the Art of Archery. Zen and the Art of Archery. And it's about this Westerner encountering Zen, and he learns it through the process of archery. And it's something like this. The end point is like this, that, okay, this might seem a little weird, but don't look, see. Don't look, see. Look is an action. See is just an experience you're having. Don't listen, hear. Don't touch, feel. If you have that kind of breakdown of separation with your device, there's really no separation anymore. I'm guessing. I would like to have been, and I failed miserably in my youth, but a musician. The way that the separation between the musician and the instrument goes away. All they experience is the music. It's just the music, right? So, I'm kind of like a lot of people, a big fan, partly maybe my age, but Hendrix, the way that Jimi Hendrix transformed the blues guitar, where it was just like the guitar and him, it was just one thing. And the way that he used distortion, that used to be like, that's noise, but it became an elaboration on a note, that allowing the separation to break down, the apparent, like Zen and the Art of Archery, where, bit by bit, the person wasn't holding a bow with an arrow and shooting that arrow by his intention at the target. All those separations broke down, and it was just simply one unified experience. I think that points in the direction of earlier what you called the attunement. And I love that. I'm going to use that in my own head and also in talking to people, because I think that's much of where it's at, is the attunement, what you call the attunement. That whether it's recognized or not, it's the breakdown of all these obstructive beliefs into just the fact of the experience. That's a little philosophical, don't you think?
It works for me.
Works for you. Okay. We're going to keep on a roll with a little momentum here. This is a little bit of an elaboration, but also this was a big change for me too. And I'm hoping that some of these learned experiences are attractive to those of us listening right now. a little bit more in this the Tibetan thing. It's not because it's Tibetan. It's just, I mean, they bumped into yogic experiences or meditative experiences, and okay, all good. The thing about motion, the thing about motion has a direct relationship to this thing about space, distance, right? Because right now I'm waving my hand back and forth. So there's motion, and this motion is occurring because of movement in space, right? And prayer wheels are turned. Even the ones in the stream, they're not turned by human hands, they're turned by water. And along this manner, you understand that even I mean, most of us in the West are familiar with the prayer flags, right? And like, what's going on here? Why do they have to like spin this thing or even have wind, you know, flap the prayer flag? What's going on here? Okay, this is a yogic appreciation, accept it or not. I tend to accept it. That because we're three-dimensional beings, we have this thing called space right between me and my computer screen right now, or the camera, like right there. There's that thing. But in consciousness, in the mental level, there is no 3D space, right? Actually, what we interpret with our senses as space is actually the purity of consciousness. So in the same way that a thought or an image, you could say, moves through your mind, the way it comes and stays and goes, that's not really a movement in space when the wheel is turning. That is a movement in mind. That's a movement in mind. That's a movement in your mind. And it looks like it's moving in space. So any gesture is, when I go like, you know, like blessing you, like, or fuck you, or, you know, the different things that we do where we use motion, physical motion, this motion in space is actually movement in mind. And that is a real big deal. It's like, oh, okay, it's like something, like it starts to come together so that when you're working with your device, when you think something has to move in space, it's not moving in space, it's moving in mind, it's moving in consciousness. So an apparent movement in space is actually a movement in mind or consciousness. That's why the prayer flag thing. The idea is they put all these imprints, you know, mantras and yantras and things on the flag. And then when the wind moves it, they say that it's dispersing the blessings to everybody atmospherically. That's a metaphor. That's a metaphor. You understand, when we say be here now, that's a metaphor. That's not a direction. You know, here there is no physical place in space called here. There's no physical place in space called here. And there's no moment in time called now. These are not actual directions. They're metaphors for certain states of consciousness. That's why so much of remote healing, quote unquote, why conscious healing, so much of what we do is metaphoric. It's not actual, it's metaphoric. So that's why when I thought about the prayer flag, then I think about the flags of countries, right? And the idea of planting a flag, you know, when the captors take the castle and they put their flag there. Okay, it's psychological, but the idea of this, the symbolic message mentally, I thought, wow, that's amazing. So I thought about this more and more. And the kinds of rituals, fire pujas, became more obvious to me. And fire and electricity, we can put those kind of in the same category if you want. I mean, stretch your mind a little bit. I was raised Roman Catholic, and we had a lot of rituals and ceremonies. And, you know, I liked them a lot when I was a kid, and now I understand them better. I'm not a practicing Catholic. I don't know what I am, working at Human. But the idea is you go to a church, and you could make a prayer. Remember the whole thing of the prayer. The prayer is not what you say. The prayer is what you feel as you say it. And one way of fortifying and focusing was to light a candle. It's called a novena candle. And the idea was, as long as the flame was happening, that the prayer was perpetuating in that flame. I said, So it was a way, I mean, I don't know this fire thing, and there's so many traditions that do it, that then when I thought about the idea, then I thought, oh yeah, the Olympic flame, right? What's the deal, man? That the Olympic flame is kept burning during the whole games, and that it is always kept in sanctuary so that it's physically carried from one game 4 years later to the site of the next game. What is it about keeping the flame burning? What is the heartfelt intention? What is the conscious effect that flame is supposed to be generating? What do you think? You're a sports guy, you pay attention to this, the Olympic flame. What do you think about that?
I think it's sort of got to do with the sort of, it's almost like the sort of momentum, like the longer you think about something, the more you've got that reality of that actually happening to you. And I think in so many ways, it's almost like the flame, it sort of reflects that perpetual momentum of all these people that have contributed for so many years. And it's like kind of momentum, which is just carrying forward,
And I think, don't you think it's exciting, it's fortifying and focusing the conscious intent?
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So, when we look around, we see that actually we have embedded in our societies conscious healing. It's just embedded everywhere, but maybe not recognized so much. I mean, the other example I have down here is the birthday cake candle. Make a wish and blow out the candle. So you light the candles, there's the fire, there's your technique, there's your technology, there's your electricity, there's your computer, right? And you charge it consciously with a wish, with an intention. And now that it's been made, like me showering you with diamond light, blow it out, it's happened. You did it. It's conscious healing. And a birthday cake. Right? I mean, you got to
break it down like that, isn't it? Like you realize this is going on all the time, and it's like
all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, anything else like pop to your head? I don't know. It's like I have a thing where if I'm driving and an ambulance goes by, I always, I make a blessing. I say, good luck. And, by just being a nice guy? Well, I hope so. But is there some reality there? When you put it next to the Olympic flame and the birthday cake and, you think of somebody and they call, you start to realize, wait a minute, this is just the way it is. And that culturally we can pretend or believe, which is a kind of pretending, believe that we're separate, we're disconnected, when we are always, you can't even say connected because we're just one thing in terms of consciousness. Okay. This one is a little bit, we're getting, we're coming around the bend. We'll probably hit it at around 90 minutes just to give people a reach of where we're going, give or take. Using subtle helpers. Now, this can be kind of controversial. People talk about, I was raised Catholic with the concept of a guardian angel. And there are people that talk about their spirit guides or their animal spirits or these kinds of things. So what about that? In conscious healing, is there utility in this? The answer is possibly, yeah. That if you feel that you're being helped or looked upon or assisted or something, remember my Tibetan teacher, equally real and unreal, maybe, well, wait a minute. Like, are they imaginary? Well, be careful with that. Are they imagined? Are they beckoned? This is a sensitive topic. People have, widely diverse opinions about it. I would consider it a possible way of helping to fortify and focus the pre-existing connection. That if you feel enabled by protectors or angels or animal spirits or whatever, that's cool with me. You've got to filter it through yourself for that clarity and purity aspect. But in my mind, Sure. If it works for you, is benign, yeah, go for it. Do you know, Ryan, without names, obviously, do you know of anybody that feels that when they do conscious healing, that they are better enabled to fortify and focus because they have helpers?
Absolutely.
Anybody's?
Yeah,
Yeah.
most of our practitioners, for sure.
Okay. Without intimate information, any kind of an example that you can give that you may know about?
No, but often they sort of talk about sort of guards on their shoulders, or sort of angels on their shoulders, and I think as well, like when you're looking at this technology, we do our best to make technology as simple and as easy to use as possible. But the reality is, technology is presented with a set of problems or sort of mathematical problems, and
sure, when
you come to a sort of juncture, you've got a case of do I select A or do I select B? Sure. And our whole premise is that, it's so important to listen to the clinical context of the client, but equally listen to yourself and be guided by your own intuition. Mm-hmm. And whether you select A or B, there's a reason why you are selecting A or B, whether it's the guards on your shoulder or whether it's your own clinical experience. But sometimes if you just sort of give up to the universe and allow yourself to be guided pretty well. Mm-hmm. I mean, look, the first app that I built, I'm the first one to say that I gave up everything that I had, and I knew what I wanted to do, and I sat back, and I kid you not, I felt that I was guided by angels or someone. It took me 8 months. It took me 8 months to build this, but
Well, okay. So thanks for that, first of all, because innately it's a little sensitive as to how people relate or react to it. For some practitioners, they keep it secret, which is totally fine. For others, they're more vocal or open or whatever. Anyway, the invitation right now is to have an open mind, be careful, and if this is something that works for you, go for it. Go for it. My experience in this way, without details, is positive. Okay. Now we're going to finish up with a few slides around kind of macro topics that now I hope that we've first stripped down naked, looked at axioms, looked at really fundamental helpers or obstructions to the process, different belief systems, all these things to this point. And of course, as I understand, Ryan, that people engaged in this webinar will get a copy of the PowerPoint as a way of reflecting, and I think probably also, I guess, access to the copy of the presentation. So that's cool. The laws of karma and the laws of love. So healers, maybe anybody alive, but certainly with healers, I'll put ourselves in this category. Whether we're active as practitioners, whether we're designers and inventors, we're one team here, that we have to be very sensitive to these, we'll call them laws, the laws of karma and the laws of love, and to understand the distinction between the two. Okay. So first of all, at a basic level, just at a concept level, healing involves an exchange, right? This idea of give and take, and how we relate to this dynamic. For anybody that's been practicing as a healer, boy, do you bump into this a lot. This whole issue of the laws, the rules, the tendencies that govern the relationship with the healer and the subject. There's if it's like football, like soccer, like what are the rules here, right? Otherwise, I'm not sure how to play this game. And right now, working with the concept of karma, because that's kind of fundamental. Sure. And we'll see the evolution of the laws of love, but the laws of karma, basically, like it's Newtonian first law, action, reaction. That is I mean, I'm not a hardcore karmic guy where, you know, I kicked a chicken, so the next time I get born as a mouse or something like that. I don't go there, but and we'll see a little bit more. But right now, understand that there is a give and take, that there is a dynamic process, that there's a, you know, an equilibrium that seeks itself, a harmonization. I won't say balance, you know my thing on that. So there's this issue here that we have to be conscious of. So the thing about karma, and I credit my teachers for helping me move in this direction. I think it's more accurate, but hey, that karma is not this like mechanical cog thing, you know, linear, if this, that, if this, that. But what it appears to me to be is that we develop certain tendencies, mental habits, and that these mental habits can be positive or negative mental habits. So an experience comes along, because we can't process every experience at a pure virginal level, right? Our brain itself is a pattern recognition organ. It's a predictive organ. It looks for patterns. You walk in the, you know, in the garden, you look down and you see a snake, and you look down again and it's the garden hose. That we look for patterns. We develop habits because they're shortcuts. In this sense, our brain / mind, I won't separate them, is always jumping to conclusions. Our brains jump to conclusions. It's the shortcut because the flow of experience is too saturated with complex information to analyze everything down to its foundation. So we revert to habits. Again, the way you put on your socks, I'll bet it's not the same as a little toddler learning how to put on their socks or learning how to tie a shoe. At a certain point, the habituation takes over, so you don't have all that conscious attention. So good karma, by what I'll risk to be my definition, I don't own it, is good karma are mental habits that make it easier to be in a natural state. That's good karma. You know, and here in Thailand, where it's Buddhist and religious, they would call that making merit. Making merit is building up good habits. Bad karma are mental habits that make it harder to be authentic and original and natural. So you've got habits. Some of them are helpful in a good way. Some of them are destructive in a bad way. That's the karmic push and pull of things. So it's not so much a real linear, like mathematical, to me, like in our world, even the company probability wave, that karma sets up a set of probabilities. And whether you flow with the probabilities, whether you just engage in the habits, and if they're good habits, that's a good thing, or whether you've got shitty habits and you keep on going down into the ditch, that's karma. So when it comes to the healing relationship, as a healer, we have to be sensitive to our mental habits. And are those habits supportive or are those habits destructive? You know, if one of our clients does something that irritates us, does that flip our switch into irritability, and there goes the process? You know, so let's be aware of the fact that a lot of our actions are habituated. A lot of our actions have a kind of a karmic momentum. So, you know, and anybody that's been in the game knows that there are some clients that really come in and basically want you to take away their problems. I got a problem, I don't want it, you take it away, I'll give you money. And, you know, that is a minefield of disappointed and uncomfortable experiences. If it's that idea that I, the healer, I'm talking about from the conscious healer point of view. If you see in your mind that your thing karmically is to take their karma to become your karma, their negative habits to become absorbed by you, is not good. I mean, dude, that is really not good. And fortunately, many of us in the profession and in the culture, that we've matured far enough to know that the client has a responsibility, and there are all these different attitudes about it. So we have to be careful that we don't have karmic patterns, mental habits that will strengthen that destructive concept. Fix me. I used to be in practice. I had a brochure, and on the front of my brochure, written from experience, I had a saying. I had written, if I can remember it, if you want things to be different, you're going to have to change. That's what I had written on the front. First thing a person saw is like, here, read this, right? I assume you're here because you want things to be different in some kind of way. Well, if you want things to be different, you're going to have to change in some kind of way, because I can't take care of this stuff if you keep on behaving the same way and you think I can fix you. This is not going to work. This is just not going to work. So the ability to recognize these tendencies, some of us have a problem with money, charging money for something, and like, how can I charge $150 or whatever, is like, this is going on. We have to be sensitive to this kind of idea that at a fundamental level, it is an exchange, that there has to be this harmonious equilibrium in the process. You can't just take from A and load up B, and then A goes away happy and B has got a bunch of shit to shovel. So, pardon me. So the concept of the law of karma has to be refined, and watch out for habits. Now here, I've reflected a lot on this over time because of being raised religiously, and then in different, real spiritual traditions, hard-ass practices and mountain meditation retreats and all these things. It's like, the karmic thing, because it's like very like, oh yeah, that's it, man. It's all karma. It's your karma, baby. And then I started to think about, what does it mean to have a blessing? What is grace? Why does somebody call for mercy? What's compassion? What's kindness? What's forgive and forget? That doesn't sound like karma to me. Grace. And, at first I didn't understand, but now, like evangelical Baptists and, the whole thing, even in blues, mercy, mercy, mercy. What the hell is mercy? What's grace? Okay, what to me, I mean, this borders on real stupid, but for me, grace is when good shit happens that you don't deserve. It's like grace, I was graced with their presence. It's not like they really owed me one and we had to have lunch, like they, it's a bit florid, but the idea of grace, or when you say mercy, right? Okay, you did a bad thing, you're going to get punished. And somebody says, have mercy, mercy, and they say, well, okay, screw karma, action, reaction. I give you a pass on this. Or you want somebody to give you their blessings. But to me, this is when there's an evolution in consciousness where the laws of love can modify, diminish the laws and power of karma. Does every person that gets healed deserve to be healed? That's a real big question. Is it just karma? You screw it up. That's why you're sick. That's it, man. What do you think? You think that I can't take away all the dumb, stupid stuff that you did to become sick. Now you want me to help you get healed. Well, action, reaction, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, dumbass for disease. So, like what's this whole other kind of this compassion thing? Like to be kind. It's like, okay. You're trying to steal my food. I don't know. Like your kids are starving. Then okay, man, take my food. You're not stealing it. I'm giving it as a gift. It's a gift. And this whole thing, where it's not an exchange anymore. This is pretty high stratospheric places to be in, where, okay, you recognize the veracity and the reliability and the usefulness of karma, action, reaction, habits, patterns, momentum, like you were saying, momentum. But then there's this other stuff. Like, I don't know what that is, but I'm really, 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 really thankful. That's gratitude. Like, what's the whole point of gratitude? If it's just karmic, what the hell's a gratitude thing? Why is it such a big deal? Because it is a big deal. Heartfelt gratitude, in scientific studies, 4 different kind of meditation techniques, you know, the typical ones of mindfulness and then this and that. Of the 4 studied, and there were 4 classically studied, I mean, the number of the studies, but which one generated the most neurological beneficial change? Heartfelt gratitude. Like,
I can believe that for sure.
Yeah. So the encouragement for all of us working in conscious healing is to be sensitive to what we'll call the more linear mechanics, like the deterministic aspects of karma, and kind of weigh that out. And then also to begin to sensitively become aware and explore what I'm calling here the laws of love, where it starts to become more in the domain of mercy, compassion, gratitude, kindness, forgive and forget. That's not karmic. You did that shit, guess what? I forgive you, I forget it, I wipe the karmic slate clean. And there are lots and lots of theories about karma. So I'm not pretending to be an expert. However, in conscious healing, you're going to bump into that heartfelt domain where gratitude opens the door into a whole different realm. Thank you, and be well.
Garnet, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and insights into conscious healing. I must say, for myself, is what I've enjoyed about this is seeing conscious healing from a sort of different perspective. I think, you know, so often we try to look at conscious healing from a sort of scientific perspective. And really, your whole premise is that as soon as you start looking at something from a kind of external perspective is the first step. And really, in my opinion, what we've been doing is looking at conscious healing, and the first step that we've been doing, we've actually been doing it wrong. That to me has been really cool, is seeing it from a kind of different perspective. So for that, thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I can tell you a thing that helped me a lot. It's the time when I decided to give up on the concept of inside outside. I think that's another dumb one, but we'll talk about that later. Take care, buddy.
Once again, thank you. Bye-bye.